Implementing a one-to-one program. We're going to be looking at rolling out a one-to-one laptop program. There are several of these PowerPoints where you're going to notice some things being repeated on a regular basis. And that's because they're key elements. And I'm hoping by us repeating them a couple times that they really get stuck, that these are really important. Now, this was also adapted from the Laptop Institute mentoring group. So this is, again, something where I've been able to go out and search, find something, and we're reusing it. We've changed it some for our considerations. We're going to look at the top 11 recommendations. First of all, you have to focus on student learning. You need to go slowly. You need to have a phased deployment. If you try to roll it all out all at once, I'm going to do it in 3 months, we're done, it's probably not going to be a real successful start. And it may take it a year if you have the political capital to be able to actually get it rolling in a year from that. Infrastructure has got to be solid. You have to use enterprise level equipment. If you're using Soho or small office, home office equipment, it is not going to withstand the traffic. You need to build ownership and support by your stakeholders, whether that's your board, your constituency, the parents, the teachers. Teachers are key. You need to have ongoing communication with your stakeholders. You need to be talking to the people. That's how you help build the support. You need to have long-term funding commitment. As I mentioned in another presentation, it is really key to this throughout this that you realize that once you have technology, it doesn't just run itself. Things are going to break, things are going to need to be updated, there's going to be changes, there's going to be new security holes that need to be plugged. All of this takes time and money. You need to foster teacher collaboration, professional development. That needs to be something that doesn't happen just in pre-week. When teachers come in pre-week, they are slammed to the wall with saying, I've got to get ready for school. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. If you try to just shove all of your training into pre-week and you don't do any throughout the year, the teachers are so busy thinking about what have I got to do to get ready for my classes. Throughout the year, if you keep coming back and doing 15-minute lunch and learns and things like that, then teachers are like, okay, I can handle this, and they can see how they can implement it. You need to leverage student technology knowledge. There's a bunch of students out there that oftentimes are excited to tie in. That doesn't mean you just turn the keys to the kingdom over to them, but that also doesn't mean that you just only allow them to vacuum floors and dump out trash. They have a lot of skills, and with a little bit of mentoring, they can take it to the next level. Plan for continuous evaluation. You need to be looking, excuse me, as a tech person, you need to be evaluating yourself. You need to have teachers evaluating. You need to get parents' feedback. What can we do? What services can we provide? And then you also need to be having the students giving feedback to the whole administration. This is what we're doing. Informal evaluations, formal evaluations. You also need to have ongoing technology support. If there is not a support plan where teachers know I can go to this person or these people or this area, at GCA we have a computer help desk. They come here, we will take care of their issues, and we will do it in a timely fashion. The network infrastructure is absolutely key, but you also need to be able to give them resources. We've listed out a bunch of resources for our staff where we said, here's, you want to do this? Here's this. You want to find this type of engaging activity? Here's some things. And teachers will come in to say, hey, I want to do some type of activity with this class. Have you got any ideas for me? And oftentimes we're able to, well, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? And this is an area where students, you give students an opportunity to give some feedback in like that, and that's where we've tried to help the teachers understand that. The students themselves will say, what about if we do this type of project or this? And it'll really make it dynamic and engaging for the teacher and for the students. Planning is very, very key. You need to have, basically, when you're looking at rolling out a laptop program, it needs to tie in with your mission. If you do not know, if you don't have a mission for your school, then laptop programs should be the last thing on your mind. You first have to have a mission. Once you have a mission, then you need to look and see how is the technology, if we increase it, not just a laptop program, but any technological outlay. If you're going to put in projectors or smart boards or whatever you want to put into a classroom, each time you want to increase the technology, it needs to tie back in how is this going to help the mission of our school. And then the technology leadership. You need to have people that are going to be saying, yes, I will help other people and mentor other people on staff and give the leadership to provide to make this happen. There's got to be a long-term funding. If I can get 20 smart boards in here or wireless smart tablets, which in my opinion are better than smart boards, if you're going to be putting that in there, then you have to have some type of funding saying that when one of those breaks, we're going to replace it because it won't take long before something will happen and someone will say, oh, this classroom doesn't work. I never know if it's going to work or it's not going to work, so we don't even use it anymore. And you need to develop some partnerships between community members and other people who could help bring not only technological funds into the school and into the institution, but can also help provide some consulting and give direction and focus. When you're dealing with your alignment, you need to ask yourself, what are the school's primary goals? And what will we need to achieve those goals? If you say, to give them a better education, that's nice, but it's so general, it's almost useless. What do you mean by that? You need to be very specific, and your answers to determine what the primary goals are will help you define what your policies for the technological use is going to be, the software and websites you'll need and licenses you'll need, the type of focused professional development. These are the areas we're focusing on, resources that you may need to create or make sure that you have available, and types of assessments, and change in the assessments. Oh, we're going to evaluate this by doing this, this, and this. We are going to say, we'll do a survey, we'll do an informal survey, we'll do a formal survey, we'll look at our testing scores. We'll try and see how does this improve it. Then you need ways to build community support. A technology leadership team. From a K-12 technology leadership team, you need to plan, support, and provide leadership for the initiative. And I recommend that your team should consist of basically 4 essential aspects that your team needs to look at and say, this is what we're going to do. First of all, you need to look at the curriculum. Then you need to look at your school culture. You need to look at what your technological needs are, and then how are you going to provide for professional development to make this sustainable. First of all, long-term funding. It's essential for any ongoing professional development. You must be able to qualify and have qualified and experienced technical support staff. If you don't, then having all the greatest, latest technology tools is not going to be useful. I know of a school that had an amazing infrastructure set in place, and it was great for the first 5 years. Well, then they started putting in really cheap, low-grade home user equipment, circumventing this enterprise class equipment because they didn't know how to manage it, because they didn't know how to run it, and they no longer had anybody else who could configure it and keep it working properly. So they were literally unplugging top-of-the-line Cisco gear and plugging in D-Link junk home user because that's what their person who was their tech support knew how to handle. That will not be successful in the long term. You've got to have good going staff. And the technical support staff, if they're not getting ongoing training, in my opinion, if you're not getting training on a real regular basis, every 2-3 months, then you're going to be obsolete. You're not going to know what the technological trends are. If they don't read magazines, if they don't keep up, they need to be encouraged to keep up with the technology trends and for themselves, and they also need to get some professional development. There's going to be some unexpected costs due to technical problems or technology changes, network equipment upgrades. One of the things we noticed right away was we rolled it out and it was going good, but our bandwidth, our pipe to the internet was just completely full. So we said, okay, what can we do? How can we pare some things down? And at the same time, we went ahead and increased our bandwidth to the internet because we said we've got more people getting online because we went from just having 7 computer labs to every single student having a laptop. Well, that really increased the internet usage. And that's one of the things you need to look at. Partnerships are essential for establishing a foundational support. Business partnerships. Oftentimes hardware, software vendors are willing to work with you, and that can help reduce your cost. You can trade out services, increase both technological and capabilities, decrease skepticism. Intellectual partnerships with universities and educational technology groups can provide objective evaluation and data for the initiative, expertise in assisting and training the teachers and administrators. The more you can tie into, if you're a K-12 institution, tie into a public university, tie into some outside vendors. There are oftentimes school-to-school partnerships. I know that we've gone out and looked at other schools that were running laptop programs. We talked with their IT team. As we've gone out and done these type of things, we've swapped ideas back and forth. That helped make a better program. Infrastructure, resources, and support. Build and maintain a network infrastructure, and it's got to be an enterprise infrastructure. I recommend you standardize on hardware because the more diverse you make your hardware, the more you have to keep up with, the more patches, the more websites you need to go to. All of this makes it more complex of a setup. Provide digital resources and tools for your teachers. The more you can keep giving teachers ideas, that'll help them generate ideas how they can use this in class. And training is also key. There needs to be both on-site and off-site tech support. I recommend that you have some way of not only being able to support the teachers here locally. We use an online help desk software. It's fantastic. But then we also have the ability to tie into, if you're going to have people that are going to be at home or whatever, we have software where we can tie into their home machine if necessary and help them fix it remotely. I can fix our teachers' laptops if they go on like the London Studies Tour, when they go to, or the Europe Studies Tour. They're over in Europe, they're saying, I'm having problems with this. And I say, can you get to the internet? Let me take a look at your computer. I get on their computer. I can fix their computer remotely. In the deployment phase, I recommend that you go slowly. You make it a planned, thought out process. If you don't, then that's one of the issues where you might want to come back and say, oh, if you rush it too much, you're going to be so pressured that it's not going to be well, and you're not going to be, your health is not going to do well as an IT person. As an administrator, you're going to be frustrated because the IT person, it seems like they just can't get it done. I recommend that you visit other schools with laptop programs or other conferences. Determine the best, grade levels for implementation. Are you going to roll it out? If you're a high school, you're going to roll it out to all 4 grades, or are you going to roll it out as freshman, sophomore, and then the next year do all 4 grades? How are you going to roll it out? I recommend phasing in the program. I wanted to phase it in over a 5-year process. We phased it in over a 1-year process. We started talking about it 2 years. We started thinking about it seriously, but it actually, from when we got funds and started actually changing stuff, it was not quite a year process. And then professional development throughout that process. I think the teacher should have the laptops a year at minimum before they roll out the full laptop program. That helps getting the teachers used to using the laptops, raises their comfort level. Then the next year, I wanted to see it rolled out to like the freshman and sophomore. Well, we rolled it out to the whole school. And the teachers had the laptops for about 8 months before we rolled out the program. So that's one of the areas where I would have liked to go on a little bit slower. But Greg Gerard, our administrator, as he looked at it, he said he felt like our timeline, we needed to bump it up because of where we were, finances and the support in the community and dealing with the political issues, that he has a much greater understanding. He said, this is the timeline we really need to make it happen if we can. And we did. But as always, you'll find that, as an IT guy, I want to go slow, make sure that it's solid and that we've tested it. And there's a balance there. Technology policies. Are the students going to own the laptops? If the students own the laptops, I think you're into asking for some serious issues, because then you really can't legally lock them down. And in order to make it where they're going to be consistent, they're going to be working, you need to be able to lock down the laptops and say, here's our image, here's the way it needs to be set up. I've gone to some schools, and including some universities, where they've had laptop programs where they say, everyone just buy your own laptop. We provide you this certain software. When I visited with the IT departments in those different universities and stuff, they said they were literally pulling out their hair, because they said, because we require them to have a laptop, and we say you have to have access, you have to use this, and this software. Well, the people are downloading all kinds of stuff, using peer-to-peer, and because of that, their laptops weren't stable. So they bring them into the, the IT help desk department, and the help desk just like, we're getting all these different vendors. We don't know how to fix them all because they've got all this viruses and junk, and they've downloaded all this illegal stuff. What do we do with that? It was just because the school did not own the laptops, they didn't have the control to make sure that the laptop was going to stay in a working state for more than 5 or 10 minutes. You need to have an acceptable use policy. You need to have controls. And you need to have school-wide guidelines. This is what we recommend. This is what we require. And then there should be school and classroom management guidelines, including school and classroom management software. One of the issues where I've seen where schools have deployed it out, you go into the classroom, and because there's no classroom management software where the teacher can lock down the kids' laptops, and let's say, for example, they can only be in Microsoft Word, or they can only be in PowerPoint and Word. The people are out online, they're checking their game, they're playing games, they're doing this, they're doing that. If there's no way to lock down the environment, the kids really aren't paying that much attention. They're listening a little bit, but they're doing all these other things. And the teacher is frustrated. And I've seen in several places where teachers say, close the lid on the laptops, you can't use them in my classroom, because they had no control of that environment. That's key. Professional development. Teachers have to have access, I believe, to the laptops a year ahead of the program. They need to basically assess the technical and professional development needs of the staff. You need to realize your staff are going to be across the spectrum. Some are going to be early adopters, some are going to be technologically savvy, some are going to be absolutely scared to death of the laptop. And you need to gear your training. If you try and do a shotgun approach to training all the time, everyone's going to be lost, because those that are technologically advanced are going to be bored because you're going so slow, and those that are really, really, really slow are going to be sitting there going, I just don't get this. That's where you need to, I think, phase it out and split it out between the different levels. You need to identify the minimum technical competencies and standards, and then you need to realize what your teachers and administrators, what their skill levels are, and try and gear your training accordingly. There's two types of training. There's a technical training, and then there's actually integration. How are they going to pull this into their classroom environment? How are they going to pull it into their curriculum? A variety of training and professional development formats, because people think differently. When you're dealing with the community, your parents, what laptop programs, they need to have some orientation. They need to have some buy-in. They need to understand there's a code of conduct and what the laptop care is. And they, honestly, I believe, need some training also. And you need to be able to communicate with them throughout the process. We send home a weekly newsletter letting parents know this is what we're doing at GCA, this is how we're making changes, this is some new information you need to be aware of. And the students at the same time. Students need to be having continual training. At GCA, at the beginning of the school year, we're doing a 3-day orientation for new students, helping re-gear them to this is the resources and technologies you have available on the laptop and on our network. Looking at your curriculum, there's two key issues. You need to integrating the laptops into the curriculum and determine the technological competencies and assessments of the teachers, and letting teachers being able to determine the technological competencies and how can they use this tool to assess their students and really increase the learning. First of all, you need to do a little bit of research on how the laptops are going to fit into your existing curricula. How are they going to impact the curriculum? They should have an impact in the curriculum. What kinds of curricular materials can the laptops hold? What part do they play in the curriculum? What technological competencies and outcomes are you expecting the laptops to provide? And how can they be used to move beyond the current teaching and learning methods? How can they take it to the next level, make it more engaging, more interesting, and pull the students into it? Here's kind of what I would call a laptop toolkit. First of all, you need to have an operating system, Windows, Linux, Mac OS, whatever you want to have. Then you've got to have your Microsoft Office suite, or you can use, Google Docs or something like that, Open Office. We use Adobe, we use Flash, we use, UltraKey, Dreamweaver, and there's all kinds of tools that are built into the laptop. Photoshop, Movie Maker, Adobe Premiere Elements. All of these are different things that you can pull into the laptop that are engaging and interesting to the kids. They also each have unique issues that they bring up, and you need to realize, what is the impact if we put Adobe Premiere on all the laptops? The kids can watch movies. Is that okay? That's something you need to consider. There are several free laptop tools out there. Now, as I've been saying along, you have to be able to have funding to support the program. So if you think you can do everything on the free or on the cheap, your program is not going to be successful. But part of being a good technological leader is being able to say, this is where I'm going to spend some money. This is where I can save some money and still have as good an education, but I'm not having to spend large sums of money. There's ink flashcards, there's ink art, there's ink desktop, snipping tools, Microsoft Physics Illustrator, Audacity, Art Range. There's lots of software out there that you can use on laptops. GIMP for editing. GIMP is, to me, just as powerful as Photoshop. It's complicated, just like Photoshop is complicated. But there's a lot of things out there. If you're using Microsoft, Microsoft Paint.net, not Microsoft Paint, but Microsoft Paint.net is a very powerful and very easy to use photo editing software. And it's free. So each of these things that you can add into the laptop is just something for you to consider. You also, whenever you provide this much technology to the kids, you've got to be able to have some type of training to help the students to use it smart and safe. You've got to have internet safety, and you have to protect from predators. The students need to realize, if I put this kind of stuff online, what happens? And netsmarts.org and commonsensemedia.org, both of them have outstanding resources for students and for parents and for the school teachers to help them train the young people and for the young people themselves to learn how to be smart and safe online. You also need to deal with, when you get everything in a digital format, it does in some ways, I've heard people say, well, it makes cheating easier. It does and it doesn't. You need to educate on intellectual property and plagiarism and copyright issues. How do your students learn what is okay to copy and what is not? That's where you need to set up some training on what is fair use, what is not fair use. There's also some software you can use. Turnitin.com is a paid service where they can post their stuff. It'll check for plagiarism. It's a great service. We've used Viper. You can use their online one, which is scanmyessay.com, or you can download the software from scanmyessay.com, which is called Viper. The teachers can download it, put it on their laptop. We've installed it on the teachers' laptops. And with it on the laptop, the teachers can designate a certain folder where they download all their students' papers and they put it in there. Then they can run Viper, and it will not only scan the internet for plagiarism, it'll scan against all the files the students have turned in themselves. And if it's finding two files that are very, very similar, it'll let you know that, hey, these two students probably copied off of each other. It's a great product, and it's free.